Today, I want to talk to you about 3 of the most powerful words you can ever say in your personal and professional journey. You shall not pass. Those words don't represent fear. They represent conviction. They don't build walls. They protect what matters. They aren't about shutting down opportunity. They're about refusing to compromise on what's essential. Too often, we're taught that progress is about letting everything through, every idea, every trend, every shortcut. But the truth is, progress is also about discipline. It's about knowing what to let go and, more importantly, what to keep out. Every great product, every transformative movement, every company that changes the world was born not just by saying yes to vision, but by saying no to distraction. They drew a line in the sand. They looked at mediocrity, laziness, and doubt, and said, "You shall not pass. In your work, in your leadership, and in your life, you are the gatekeeper. You get to decide what crosses into your focus, your energy, your time." Let that responsibility empower you. Let it remind you, not everything deserves access to your attention. Not every idea deserves your signature. Innovation isn't just about what you build. It's about what you refuse to let in. There will be moments where you are tempted to take the easy route. Moments when compromise looks like convenience. But those are the exact times when you need to stand up and say with courage and clarity, "This doesn't align. This isn't worthy. This shall not pass." The people who change the world are not just dreamers. They are protectors. They guard their mission with fire. They don't let everything through the gates. They only let through what deserves to exist. So today, I invite you to be bold, to be intentional, and to carry these 3 words in your decisions, your strategy, and your purpose. You shall not pass. Thank you. Barriers are often misunderstood. Most people see them as the enemy of progress, obstacles that slow us down, that disrupt our momentum, that stand in our way. But in reality, barriers are what make progress meaningful. Without them, we wouldn't grow, we wouldn't learn, and we certainly wouldn't innovate. In every major breakthrough in history, there was first a wall that someone refused to let define the limit. That refusal to accept limitations is what ultimately sparked transformation. Barriers test our resolve. They ask a very simple but profound question. How badly do you want it? Are you willing to push harder, think deeper, and step outside of what's comfortable to find a better way forward? Because if you're not, the barrier will stand. Not as a punishment, but as a filter. One that separates those who wish from those who will. The individuals and teams who understand this don't run from resistance. They seek it out. They recognize that the more challenging the barrier, the more valuable the reward on the other side. Progress without challenge is an illusion. If there are no barriers, you're likely moving in circles or repeating the past. True progress breaks patterns, and breaking patterns requires friction. Barriers introduce this friction. They force confrontation with the status quo. They force us to look inward and ask whether the systems, assumptions, and beliefs we've carried up to this point are still serving the mission. Often they are not. And without the barrier to disrupt our momentum, we might never stop to question what needs to change. In business, in design, in leadership, barriers are where creativity begins. It's easy to make decisions when everything is flowing smoothly. But when you hit a wall, be it a technical limit, a resource constraint, or a cultural block, that's when you start to innovate. Constraints force focus. They reduce the noise and elevate the signal. They force prioritization. They demand that we strip away the unnecessary and get to the essence of what we're building and why it matters. And in that clarity, new paths emerge, often better paths than the ones we originally envisioned. The most defining aspect of a barrier is not its height or width, but your relationship to it. Some people see a barrier and see the end of the road. Others see a challenge worth engaging. That mindset shift is everything. When a team begins to see obstacles as design inputs rather than threats, they start to operate from a position of power rather than fear. Instead of asking, "How do we avoid this?" they ask, "What is this trying to teach us?" That single question has launched more innovation than any blueprint or funding cycle ever could. Barriers also reveal character. It's easy to appear competent when everything goes according to plan, but when the plan breaks down, the real leaders step forward. The individuals who lean into the problem, who choose not to fold, who gather the team and say, "This won't stop us," those are the people who shape outcomes. Barriers strip away the veneer and show you what you're made of. They test integrity, resilience, patience, and vision. They make you earn your progress, and in doing so, they make you respect it. Think about the products that changed industries. The breakthroughs that defined eras. None of them were born in smooth waters. They were forged in resistance. A team faced with a technical impossibility. A designer told it couldn't be done. A founder facing a market that wasn't ready. Every one of them encountered a barrier, and instead of retreating, they chose to build. And not just build something functional, but something that redefined what was possible. What separates those who create lasting impact from those who fade is not just talent or timing. It's their relationship to difficulty. The barrier wasn't something they worked around. It became the thing they worked through. And in that process, the work became more intentional, more focused, and more valuable. Barriers don't block the path, they are the path. Each one invites a decision, stop or evolve. The moment you choose to evolve, progress becomes real, not because it's easy, but because it's earned. And in that moment, you understand the barrier was never the enemy, it was the catalyst. Saying yes is easy. It feels agreeable, open, and optimistic. It keeps doors open and people happy. But the truth is, in the pursuit of excellence, the word no is often more valuable than yes. It's the foundation of focus, the engine of clarity, and the guardrail that prevents vision from being diluted. Every great idea, product, or mission that has ever achieved real impact has one thing in common. It was protected by 1,000 deliberate no's. When you say no, you make a choice, not just about what you're avoiding, but about what you are prioritizing. Time, energy, attention, and resources are finite. Every yes you give to one thing is a no to something else, whether you realize it or not. That's the hidden cost of indiscriminate agreement. Eventually, if you don't take control of your boundaries, the wrong things start to run your calendar, shape your decisions, and pull you away from what actually matters. In high-performance environments, saying no is not a rejection of possibility. It is an affirmation of purpose. It's not about negativity or arrogance. It's about discipline, about understanding that doing fewer things better will always beat doing more things poorly. The most respected leaders, creators, and thinkers in the world are not the ones who try to do everything. They're the ones who make the hardest decisions about what not to do. No is a scalpel. It refines strategy. It sharpens ideas. It eliminates waste. When you remove what doesn't align, what remains becomes stronger, more intentional, and more effective. It's like pruning a tree, not because the branches are bad, but because if you don't, growth becomes unsustainable. Without the discipline to say no, even the best ideas become bloated, directionless, or worse, irrelevant. Organizations that fail to say no fall into the trap of trying to please everyone. They build products with too many features, campaigns with no clear message, cultures with no identity. In trying to include everything, they stand for nothing. They confuse motion with progress, but companies and teams that learn to say no communicate powerfully what they believe in. They draw a line and say, this is who we are, this is what we solve, and this is what we don't do. That clarity isn't restrictive, it's liberating. Saying no also protects your integrity. There will be situations when the easiest move is to agree to say yes to a deal, a partnership, a shortcut that feels lucrative in the short term but contradicts your values in the long run. In those moments, no becomes a statement of self-respect. It is a way of ensuring that your vision remains yours, because once you start compromising under pressure, you set a precedent, and soon you find yourself drifting from the very reason you started. The fear behind saying no is often tied to what people will think. Will they walk away? Will they judge? Will they take it personally? But the opposite tends to happen. When people see that you say no thoughtfully and consistently, they begin to trust your judgment. They recognize you are not driven by impulse or flattery, but by something more grounded. In fact, no builds credibility faster than yes ever could. It shows you're not available for everything because you're focused on something meaningful. No also creates space, creative breakthroughs, deep thinking, real progress. These things don't happen in crowded, overcommitted environments. They require room to breathe, silence, time. If your calendar is booked wall to wall with obligations you didn't critically evaluate, when does true innovation happen? Saying no is the first step toward reclaiming that space. It's not an act of rebellion, it's an act of design. You're designing your time, your team, your product, and removing what doesn't serve the final vision. There is an art to saying no. It doesn't have to be hostile. It can be graceful, respectful, and clear. But it must be firm, because every time you say no with intention, you're sending a message, not just to others, but to yourself. You're reminding yourself of what you stand for. You're reinforcing your commitment to excellence, to purpose, to depth over distraction. And if you're building something that matters, whether it's a product, a culture, or a legacy, you will have to say no more than most are comfortable with. That discomfort is a signal that you're on the right path. Because saying no isn't closing a door, it's opening the right one. Vision without protection is a liability. It can be bent, diluted, or taken off course by forces that seem minor at first, but ultimately undermine the very foundation it was built on. Guarding vision isn't about secrecy or exclusion. It's about preserving clarity, direction, and authenticity. It's about having the courage to say, "You shall not pass," to anything that threatens the integrity of what you are trying to build, whether that's a product, a company, a team, or a way of thinking. The integrity of a vision is defined not only by its ambition, but also by how it withstands pressure. Pressure to conform, to compromise, to scale too quickly, to please the wrong audience, to chase easy wins. Every bold idea will encounter these forces. Some come disguised as opportunities, others as feedback or partnerships. But what makes them dangerous is not their appearance. It's how easily they can pull you away from your core without you even noticing. The erosion of vision rarely happens in one dramatic collapse. It's slow, it's incremental, and it begins the moment you let something in that doesn't belong. Guarding your vision means being deliberate with who and what you allow into your process. Not every voice should shape your direction. Not every market trend deserves a response. Not every piece of advice, even when well-intentioned, aligns with your purpose. When you protect your vision, you are choosing to operate with intention, not reaction. You are not led by noise. You are led by principles, values, and a deep understanding of why the work exists in the first place. This level of discipline requires an internal compass. When integrity is compromised, it's often because there was no standard to measure against. Without a clearly defined why, even the smartest team can fall into building things that look good on the surface but lack soul. When a company loses its vision, decisions start to be made for the wrong reasons. Because it's trending, because it's faster, because a competitor is doing it, because investors want a quick return. And while those reasons might create movement, they do not create meaning. Guarding integrity is not about resisting change. It's about knowing which changes support the vision and which changes distort it. Flexibility is vital, but flexibility without boundaries becomes chaos. Strong leaders understand the difference. They know how to evolve without abandoning the mission. They know how to innovate while remaining rooted in purpose. They recognize that growth and integrity are not opposites. They are partners. And when held in balance, they create brands, cultures, and products that endure. Saying "you shall not pass" is sometimes a lonely decision. It can mean turning down investment that comes with strings. It can mean choosing the slower path instead of the shortcut. It can mean explaining to a team why they have to hold the line, even when everything around them says otherwise. But those moments are where trust is built. Teams follow leaders who are consistent, not just when things are easy, but when things are tested. They want to know the mission won't be rewritten for convenience. They want to believe that what they are building actually means something. Visionaries are often tempted to chase scale before they've established soul. But what's the point of growing something that no longer reflects what it set out to be? At scale, compromise only magnifies. If the foundation isn't protected early on, everything built on top of it is unstable. That's why guarding vision is not just a leadership responsibility. It's a design decision. It's about engineering clarity into every layer of the organization, from product to people to process. In creative work, vision is often the most fragile asset. It doesn't live in spreadsheets or roadmaps. It lives in intention, in culture, in the daily decisions that either reinforce it or erode it. That's why it must be protected, fiercely and unapologetically. When distractions arrive, and they always will, the question must be asked, does this serve the vision or does it dilute it? The answer to that question defines everything. Guarding vision and integrity is not a defensive posture. It's a commitment to excellence. It's about choosing depth over popularity, quality over speed, meaning over noise. And every time you hold that line, you're not just protecting an idea. You're giving it the best possible chance to become something timeless. The status quo is comfortable. It feels safe, familiar, and predictable. It creates the illusion of control and stability, but comfort is not the birthplace of innovation. If anything, comfort is where progress begins to decay. The most significant advancements in history, whether in technology, business, science, or social change, came not from those who accepted what was, but from those who questioned it. Challenging the status quo is not just an act of defiance. It is a responsibility for anyone who aims to build something that matters. The problem with the status quo is that it often outlives its relevance. Systems, processes, and beliefs that once served a purpose can become rigid over time. What starts as a best practice becomes an unquestioned habit. Organizations adopt procedures not because they're effective, but because that's how we've always done it. This inertia kills innovation. It teaches people to follow rather than think. It rewards repetition over reinvention. And eventually, it leads to stagnation disguised as success. Challenging the status quo starts with the courage to ask a simple but powerful question. Why? Why is this done this way? Why does this rule exist? Why hasn't this changed? This question is the gateway to insight. It reveals assumptions that have never been tested. It uncovers inefficiencies hiding behind tradition. It shakes the foundation just enough to expose where it is weak. But asking why is only the beginning. It must be followed by the even bolder question: what if there's a better way? Most resistance to challenging the status quo doesn't come from logic. It comes from fear. Fear of failure, fear of being wrong, fear of upsetting those who benefit from things staying the same. But real progress only happens when we are willing to push past that fear, when we choose not to be limited by inherited constraints, when we understand that just because something has been accepted doesn't mean it's optimal. History doesn't remember those who maintained the norm. It remembers those who redefined it. Organizations that encourage status quo thinking eventually lose relevance. They might enjoy short-term stability, but they sacrifice long-term impact. Teams within those organizations learn to keep their heads down. They stop asking questions. They focus on execution instead of innovation. And eventually they get disrupted by startups, by technologies, by new generations who refuse to play by the same rules. The irony is that defending the status quo in the name of safety is often the riskiest move of all. Challenging the status quo doesn't always mean tearing everything down. Sometimes it's about refinement, not revolution. But the key is intentionality. Are we doing this because it's right, or because it's familiar? Are we continuing this approach because it still serves our goals, or because changing it would be uncomfortable? Challengers are not reckless, they are rigorous. They question assumptions, gather insights, test hypotheses, and move with precision. But they never settle for good enough. At a personal level, status quo thinking is often what keeps people from growth. It shows up as routines that no longer serve us, beliefs that limit us, and environments that numb our creativity. To challenge the status quo internally is to look at your own habits and ask, is this moving me forward or just keeping me busy? Progress requires disruption, not just in the external world, but in our own mindsets. The most effective leaders are the ones who constantly challenge themselves before challenging others. Cultural change begins when individuals refuse to accept outdated norms. When someone speaks up in a meeting and challenges an inefficient process. When a designer questions a legacy feature that no longer delivers value. When an engineer proposes a new architecture that makes the old one obsolete. These moments may seem small, but they are the sparks of transformation. They create a culture where innovation isn't a buzzword, it's a behavior, and in that kind of culture, "you shall not pass" becomes a mantra for guarding against complacency. Challenging the status quo demands resilience. People will resist. They will defend what they know. They will point to tradition, authority, or legacy. But leaders don't lead by consensus. They lead by vision. They know that change is uncomfortable but necessary. And they are willing to endure discomfort in the short term to create meaningful outcomes in the long term. Because they are not in love with the way things are. They are in love with what things could be. Disruption is not a threat to legacy. It's what gives legacy a future. The brands, teams, and individuals that leave a mark on the world are not the ones who mastered convention. They are the ones who reimagined it. Not out of rebellion, but out of a deep belief that things can be better, and a relentless commitment to make it so. Ready for the fifth keynote, I can continue in the same style. Compliance is easy, it is comfortable. It tells you exactly what to do and asks nothing more than obedience. It doesn't require reflection, initiative, or risk. It simply asks for alignment. Follow the process, follow the rules, follow the leader. But while compliance may create order, it rarely creates progress. Compliance doesn't challenge systems. It doesn't question assumptions. It doesn't build movements or spark revolutions. Courage does. Courage is uncomfortable. It puts you in unfamiliar territory. It asks you to raise your voice when silence is safer. It demands that you think independently in environments built for uniformity. Courage makes you visible. And visibility brings vulnerability, criticism, scrutiny, resistance. That is why it's rare. Not because people are incapable of courage, but because so many are trained to prioritize acceptance over authenticity. In every organization, there is a gravitational pull toward compliance. Processes are created to maintain structure. Policies are written to reduce risk. But over time, those structures, designed originally for stability, begin to stifle ingenuity. Compliance becomes a culture. People stop thinking creatively and start thinking transactionally. The question becomes, what am I allowed to do, instead of what is the right thing to do? That shift is subtle, but deadly. Courage disrupts that pattern. It asks better questions. It sees beyond what is permitted and into what is possible. Courage refuses to rubber-stamp decisions that don't feel right, even if they're legal, even if they're profitable. Because courage is rooted in conscience, not convenience. In every major ethical failure, whether in business, politics, or society, the absence of courage was louder than the presence of wrongdoing. It's not that no one saw the problem. It's that not enough people had the courage to confront it. Courage does not mean recklessness. It means responsibility. It's about taking thoughtful, principled action in the face of pressure or uncertainty. It's about speaking up when a decision contradicts your values. It's about challenging leadership when vision is lost. It's about being willing to lose comfort in the pursuit of what's right. And yes, it often comes at a cost: missed promotions, difficult conversations, even isolation. But the long-term cost of silence is far greater. A culture that stops believing in itself. Teams built on compliance create predictability. Teams built on courage create possibility. When people are encouraged to challenge respectfully, question openly, and take initiative without fear of punishment, organizations evolve. The most successful leaders don't surround themselves with echo chambers. They surround themselves with thinkers, people who bring conviction, not just compliance, people who will tell the truth even when it's hard to hear. In decision making, courage manifests as the ability to say no when saying yes is easier. It's turning down the client who wants you to bend your standards. It's rejecting a shortcut that sacrifices quality for speed. It's holding the line on principle, even when the room leans toward compromise. And often it's standing alone, at least for a while. Courage isn't always celebrated in the moment. Sometimes it's questioned, misunderstood, resisted. But over time it earns respect, and respect builds influence. Courage scales. When one person chooses to act with integrity, it gives others permission to do the same. It rewires the culture, it says. Here we don't just follow rules, we follow purpose. That shift transforms organizations from compliant machines into living systems, adaptive, principled, and innovative. And when pressure hits, as it inevitably does, it's these systems that remain grounded. Not because they're the most rigid, but because they've been built on truth, not obedience. In creative environments, courage is the root of originality. New ideas are, by nature, threats to old ideas. So every time someone brings something new to the table, they risk rejection. Courage allows them to speak anyway, to present the unconventional concept, to suggest the uncomfortable improvement, to pursue the uncertain path. Without courage, creativity suffocates under the weight of conformity. Compliance may keep the machine running, but courage ensures it's running in the right direction. When you build for compliance alone, you create systems that resist change. But when you lead with courage, you create systems that pursue what's right, even if it's not what's easy, popular, or expected. The future does not belong to those who simply follow instructions. It belongs to those who question them, who improve them, who transcend them when necessary, because real leadership, real progress, and real transformation are never born from compliance. They are born from courage,